So what we're going to try today is we're going to use Microsoft's Copilot and we're going to do some budgeting. So some people have an idea of how to budget in general. Some people have never budgeted. If you've never budgeted, that's what we're going to assume that we're at right now with our ask to Copilot. So we're going to go in there, we're going to say, hey, I don't know how to budget. I'm trying to learn. What can you teach me about budgeting? And then the goal is by the end of this, we not only have a budget, but we understand how to budget and an idea of how to execute on the budget they've given us. So let's go ahead and get started. Off to the right here, you have your Copilot GPTs. So just like how ChatGPT has 4.0 or 4.0, it also has the different iterations of it. Here, you have Copilot's GPTs. So you have Copilot, you have Designer, you have Vacation Planner, you have Cooking Assistant, which actually would have been helpful for the Cooking for the Month one, and Fitness Trainer. Now, obviously, we're just going to stay on Copilot here. Then you also have plugins. So if you go here, you can enhance your search with the power of web, including news, multimedia, and shopping. You can disable that to not take stuff from the web, but to me, that's what I want to try with Copilot because some AI will utilize just user input. So they'll only learn based on what you give it. So if you give it inputs as users, it will learn based on those inputs what it should feed back. Or it can use what's on the web. Now this is one that uses a mix of the two. So what we're going to do is we're going to utilize the search function here because it's going to be very handy and you'll see in a second why we want to use that. Asking about recipes or meal plans, Instacart could be helpful. So we could have done that, but we want to show ChatGPT for the other one of how to do stuff with using ChatGPT to help you cook for the month. So Instacart will be a way to see, okay, can you help me do meal plans with Instacart? That's another way to do it, but we're not going to touch on that because obviously we've done that. Klarna, if you want to compare different prices, online shopping, or sync your phone up itself. Contact information, read and send text messages using your Android phone. All kinds of different ways that you can use it. So we're not going to use any of that, but I just want to show you it's available. Then we're going to get into here, and there's conversation style. Now there's creative, there's balanced, there's precise. If we look at creative, that's going to say, okay, start an original and imaginative chat. So this is something that's just kind of more casual, right? You don't really want a whole lot of hard facts. You're not sitting there going, well, I want to figure out something about Pythagorean theorem or something more mathematical. You're not going to do that here. This is more, I'm trying to do a story and I kind of want to figure out how I can do that. And let's say that there's a dragon in the story and you're getting a little more just imaginative, right? That makes sense for creative. Then there's balanced. Now this is obviously going to be for your more everyday informed chats. So this is going to be something like, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to budget. This is the perfect place for that to be. So we're going to keep here, but just for sake of showing you, more precise, we're going to look and it's going to say that's for a concise chat useful for fact finding. So let's say you're trying to figure out information about someone. Let's say you're trying to figure out the birthday of a celebrity. They have their birthday. So if you say, when is Johnny Depp born? He's only ever born one time. So it's not going to sit there and go, well, you know, he could be born at this time and pontificate on it. No, it's going to give you when he was born. So this is more precise, fact-based. Think of it kind of a way to research stuff. So we're going to go to more balanced, and it's going to tell us, okay, go ahead and figure out what we should do first. Now it's important to note, it gives you 5 different things that you can ask. So you're going to get 5 things you can prompt it with before it closes that chat session. Now you will have access to that chat session. If you look over here on the right, you can use that and you can click into that whenever. So it will appear here afterwards, but it's not there currently. And you can rename it and call it whatever you like when it's done, or delete it if you like. But as of right now, there is nothing, so we're not going to see anything up there. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I don't know how to budget. Please help me learn how. Let's see what it tells us. Not giving it a whole lot of information, it's going to figure it out. So it's going to give us all these different options, and it's going to say, here's how you can budget, here's different budgeting methods and ideas, and here's ways that you can go about doing it. So this is pretty helpful, and what I really like about it is at the bottom, you notice it gives you resources where you can learn more about it, and it even gives you Ramsey Solutions budgeting. Every dollar, I believe, is what it is. Let's see real quick. I think it's their budgeting app from Dave Ramsey. Yes, every dollar. So if you want to just say, I just need some resources for something, you could Google that obviously, or you could go on, you could ask, what do you think would be the best fit for what I'm trying to do into an AI? And it could say, okay, here's something that makes the most sense for what you're doing. Now remember again, it is a large language model. So even though it has access to the internet, it can't actually think for itself. It is a predictive text-based thing. So what it's doing is it's trying to figure out, based on your inputs, what is the next logical output that it should give. It's not sitting there and going, yeah, budgeting, that's something that we should really figure out. Well, I think it's not really doing that. It's just scouring the web for things based on that, and it's looking at what the inputs it's given are and what the likely outputs for it would pair up most likely with. Now, this can be based on something that is just based on the input of the people who are giving it information, so it could be just from the user base and not use the internet. It could just use the internet, or it could do a mix of the two. So we're trying to do a mix of the two. As we saw with the plugin, we've toggled on to be able to take from the internet. So let's see what it gave us real quick. So it's basically telling you that budgeting is a great way to manage your money effectively. It's telling you that you can calculate your income in different ways. It's telling you that you want to look at after tax, because whatever you have after tax is what you actually have. So that's important. If you've never budgeted before, you might say, oh, well, my gross pay is this amount, so I'm going to budget based on my gross. You're always going to be spending more money than you have if you're going based on your gross, because that's before taxes come out, so that's not actually how much money you have. And it even goes further and says you have deductions like 401k sometimes. Make sure that you are taking those into account, because some are pre-tax, some are post-tax. Now you can add those back in depending on it, and then you can subtract out any expenses that reduce your income. So taxes or business expenses. So depending on what you're doing, you might own your own business. You might need to set some money aside for taxes. Or if you are a 1099 employee, you won't actually have your taxes taken out, and you need to be saving those taxes for when it comes time to pay for those taxes. Or if you're W-2'd and you're actually an employee of a company, those will usually get taken out beforehand. So there's all kinds of different ways that that works, and you can just think through this and go, okay, which am I, what makes sense for me, and then it can help you to make your budget based on that. That's something, if you haven't done budgeting, you might not think about, and that's a really important thing to consider. So let's keep looking. Prioritize your goals. You want to figure out, what are you trying to do? Do you want to build an emergency fund? That's in case something bad happens and you need money to pay for it. I always try to keep like $1,000 in mind, but some people want more. You can figure that out and you can go, oh, emergency fund. And maybe you go and you ask it, what is an emergency fund? Or you pull up a tab and you Google that. There's all kinds of ways to go about this. But since we know what that is now, we're just going to keep going with this. Debt repayment's another possibility where you say, I want to pay off my student loans. How can I do that? That's something you can figure out, and you can even tell it, well, I have $30,000 in student loans. How do I pay that off in a year? How much do I need to pay each month to do that? How much money do I need to make to do that if my expenses are X amount? So that's a way to go about it. Savings. Do you want to have a savings account? How much do you want to have in savings? Where do you want to keep your savings at? Is there somewhere you recommend? Is there a high yield savings account? What is that? There's all kinds of rabbit holes you can go down, but we're just trying to look at the basic right now. Choose a budgeting method. The 50-30-20 rule. Envelope system. Zero-based budget. 50-30-20 kind of breaks it down of what that is too, because that's not something everyone knows. 50% for your needs, including your debt minimums, 30% for your wants, and 20% for savings and debt repayment beyond your minimums. So that's pretty helpful to see. It's like, okay, if I don't know how to do it, I can just look at a percentage of my income and I can say, well, based on my income, 50% has to go here, 30% can go here, and 20% should go here. And you can just do that before you have any idea of, well, I don't know how much comes out. Well, if you know how much you're making, you can say, well, this is the amount that should be allocated to this. Let's see how much I spend in a month and if I'm even hitting those. Maybe you're at 80% for your needs and you go, wow, I might need to downsize. Or maybe you're only at 30% for your needs. You go, wow, I'm doing better than I thought. That's usually not the case with budgeting. Unfortunately, it usually is you spend more than you have. But either way, this is a great way to start without actually telling it, well, I'm using this amount of money for rent and I'm using this amount of money for childcare. Whatever that looks like for you, this is a way to do it before actually adding in what you actually spend. So tracking your spending, record your expenses, use online budgeting tools, and it gives you some of these down below, but it's just telling you, hey, that's something you could do. You can even keep your own receipts. You can do stuff like that. You can do the envelope system. There's all kinds of ways to do it. And then you can automate your savings to make it easier. So that's another thing. If you use something like the 50-30-20 rule, then you could have that percentage that's going into savings automated. So you can say, okay, well, if I want X percentage put into savings, I can automate that. So that way it comes out of my check and I never see it. I can tell my employer that I want to have that happen, and you can do that. Then you could regularly review and adjust. So revisit your budget quarterly. I personally do it every week. I'm a little bit like that, where I just want to stay on top of stuff because I have my spending goals I'm trying to get to, of not spending a certain amount rather, or my budget goals, my savings goals, and paying off debt. But there's different ways that you can tailor it to your different needs. Adapt as your income, expenses, and priorities change. Maybe you have some sort of an expense that comes up that's big. You need new tires on your car. Didn't think you would. Something happens with that. You can then reallocate, readjust, and change stuff. So that's a way to go about it. You can start budgeting for free on something like the Ramsey Solutions Every Dollar app, or you can go here and learn more from NerdWallet. Your guide to budget, how much do you need to budget? Money Fit, learn how to budget, comprehensive guide. The Penny Hoarder, how to build a household budget, 4 simple steps. And then you can even hit the 3 down here, and you get more. Better Money Habits, Bank of America, Ramsey Solutions, as we saw, how to make a budget, and another NerdWallet. So down here, you're going to see a couple things. 1 of 5. So it's saying you've used 1 of your 5 prompts for this chat session. Now, obviously, once we're done with this, we can start a new one and continue on with our questions. But one thing is true. It's not going to take the information that you have put in this session and take it with it to the next one. It is siloed in its own thing. Much like with ChatGPT, where I've said before, if you start something just in one of those, that's going to remain in one of those. If we bounce out of that, we lose that conversation. It loses the context. It loses that information. You can copy paste some of that information into whatever it is that you're doing in the next session, but it's currently just going to be siloed to this session. So that's why you kind of want to make sure it counts. Again, this is the free version. It might give you more if you do a paid version, but we're just dealing with the free version because you can really get out of it what you need to for a lot of stuff like budgeting. So it's going to give you these prompts down here. What are some common budgeting mistakes? That's something people might ask. How can I save money on groceries? We know the answer to that. Tell me more about the envelope system. So that's something it mentions, and you might have questions on that and say, I'm not really sure what that is. What is the envelope system? Now, some of this you can Google, obviously, or you can just use it here. Now, what I want to say is I make $60,000 a year. I want to pay off $30,000 in student loans in 5 years. How much money do I need to pay each month to do this? Now this is going to do a little bit of just computation basic math, and it's going to tell you the formula. Now this isn't something that is super nuanced, but it's just to give you an idea that yeah, you can go and you can do this in a calculator, but you can also do it here. And this is an easy way to check to make sure everything's right. So you can say, okay, $500 a month to achieve your goal. Is that right? I don't know. So what you can do is you can go to a calculator and you can check. So let's go ahead and check. Let's go in and let's add the calculator to our screen. So $30,000 divided by 12 months in a year divided by 5 years. $500. That's correct. So we know it's right, and we know that we've gotten this to what number it needs to be, and that everything is good to go. So we're going to have a little bit higher of trust in it because we know, okay, it got that right, and it's going to tell you that, yeah, approximately $500 is what you need. So next question is, I pay rent, food, utilities, a car payment, car insurance, health insurance, and my phone and internet. How much money would I spend on that in the Columbus, Ohio area if I rent a 1-bedroom apartment? So let's see if it can look and scour the web to figure out what is the cost of living for Columbus, Ohio, and how much would you even start to spend in that? Because maybe you're just finishing up college somewhere else, but you're moving to Columbus, and that's going to be where you're going to actually have your expenses. So maybe you don't know, and maybe you're getting off your parents' phone plan, maybe you're getting health insurance, all these things. So basically what it's doing is it's saying, okay, here is the cost for all these different things. And it has cost of living calculator, Columbus, Ohio from NerdWallet. So it's scouring the internet and it's citing its sources, saying, okay, the median rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus is currently $1,583 per month. We did ask it, though, if you notice, for a 1-bedroom apartment. So you need to make sure that you're checking these things because obviously we made sure the math was correct, but this looked at a 2-bedroom. So we don't want a 2-bedroom, we just want a 1-bedroom. So we can ask it and say, that is something that we want to just change and we want to make sure it's a 1-bedroom. So utilities tend to cost 5.58% lower than the national average. Now what's interesting is it is not going to tell you how much that is. It's just saying comparatively, this is how much it is. So that's also not super helpful, and that's something we need to take into account. Food. Estimated monthly cost of groceries and dining out varies, but is generally lower than in larger cities like New York. Again, it's not really giving us a hard, fast number, so we're not a huge fan of that either. Car payment, insurance, they depend on your specific car and driving history. This is actually a pretty good answer because it does vary by person, though we can ask it for averages. Health insurance varies widely. That is very true based on your coverage and provider, so it's not going to give us that. Average cost of phone and internet service in Columbus is around $100 to $150 per month. Now that actually gives us a number. So it says it's approximations and all that, and then it gives you different sources, most of which are going to be cost of living calculators. So what I'm going to say is, please give me a numerical estimate for a 1-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio, utilities for that apartment, a car payment on a Chevy Impala, we'll say a 2020, and health insurance for one 25-year-old in Columbus, Ohio. We'll say numerical cost estimates. Let's see if it can refine it some for us. I tried to give it a little more information because it's true. A car and your driving history is a little bit harder. So it's looking right now. So now it gave us a 1-bedroom. Remember how before it gave us a 2-bedroom? It has fixed that. So the average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in Columbus is approximately $1,056 per month. Quick caveat and aside, what's really funny about this, my rent is exactly $1 higher than that, and I am in Columbus. So I think that's really, really funny. So it is right. I can tell you that. But that was actually on the cheaper side. It just really depends where you're looking in safety. Utilities. Basic utilities, electric, water, gas, and fuel are around $235.38 per month. It's giving you a site for that. Okay, yes it is. So that's pretty nice. That's pretty fair. That's pretty fair. I pay about, I would say 150-ish for electric and about 50-ish for gas a month in my 1-bedroom apartment. And water is included in my rent, but you know what that is? It's about $30 per person. So this is very accurate for that. Car payment on a Chevy Impala. Now I don't have an Impala. I should have probably done what I have, but average price paid for an Impala is $21,620, assuming a 10% down payment and a 60-month loan term. The monthly car payment will be approximately $487. Now, that math makes sense to me. It's not something that I am checking actively right now, but we're going to assume, but if you want to not assume and make sure, you can take out a loan calculator and put all this information into it to see, okay, is this actually as it's saying, or are these numbers off, to make sure that it actually calculates to $487. So you can do that, but it's just throwing out, here's a number that makes sense. Now, Embeddor offers silver HMO plans in Ohio, an average monthly rate of $487, a maximum out of pocket of $5,400. So that's helpful. It gives us different options to check that out. And it says 1 bedrooms for rent, Columbus, Ohio. So it's thinking, hey, maybe you're looking. Let's give you a couple options to figure out what you could do for rentals. So that's kind of nice. And you can check this out and say, yeah, you know what? I am moving up there for work. I got my first job. Let's see what apartments there are. So the recording actually stopped after I went into the apartments.com listing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you what I put into Copilot and then what it gave me back as a result, and we're just going to go from there. So my apologies on that. It just wasn't showing anything on my screen. It was stuck on my face in a very flattering pain. So basically what I did was I said, hey, please build me a budget given the info above for 1 person each month with enough money left over to save and invest. And then in parentheticals, I put preferably over $200 per month. So Copilot said, sure, let's build a budget based on this. And it assumed some details. It said you want to save and invest about $200 a month. So then the emergency fund, it said, we're going to allocate some funds for an emergency fund. That's pretty cool. I didn't ask it to. I'm a big fan of emergency funds. I highly recommend it to anyone. Then it said, here's your fixed expenses. So it took that from up above. And then it said variable expenses. You got that $300 for food. And then it said emergency fund. You want about 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. So let's start with $1,000. The remaining for savings and investments. You got $5,000 minus your fixed expenses plus your food and your emergency fund. Gives you about $2,700 left over. So it said you can set aside $200 for savings and you have about $2,500 left over for discretionary spending. And that being said, this number is my gross. This is not my net. So what we want is our net, because our gross is not actually what we're going to be budgeting, because we don't actually have that money. That money is not ours to keep, only the net is. So it gives you some information here. Basically what I did was I took that info. You can see over here you got recents. So budgeting basics is what we're in. This used up our last 5. So as you can see, it should tell us that we have hit our 5 out of 5, or it should tell us the one above was the 4 out of 5. Well, either way, this one's been closed, and we're going to come up here, and it's going to show all the things that I talked to it about for the next one. So I took and copy pasted that information in, and I tried some. And I got a little bit experimental with it, and I said, based on the following, please adjust the $60,000 annual salary to a net income using taxes for Columbus, Ohio, and ripple it through the budget. And then I took what it had said and I put it. It didn't very much work, so it didn't really work. So what it did was it took all the info and it just regurgitated it. So then I said, please adjust my annual income to net, not gross. That's all I said. It did. So as you can see, it ripples. So it says, here's your federal income tax, here's your state income tax. Here's Social Security and Medicare. Now let's calculate that net income. So it told me all this information, and it gave me how much I would have net left. So when I'm done, I have about $40,810 instead of $60,000. That's a little more realistic. So I said, based on that net income, how much is left over each month after my above expenses? It said, sure. So it took all the info I'd taken from the past thing, and it took it and it put it into here, which sometimes if you want to, if you're out of different prompts that you can ask it for within that chat dialog box, you can take an output of what it did from the last thing, copy it, which you can hit this button here and copy, which is what I did to bring it over, and then paste it in, and then say, based on this info, do blank. So then you can kind of pick up where you left off and just not have to just reinvent the wheel and do all that stuff again. So you can kind of bring in information from a previous dialogue that you had with it that it's not able to see and bring it somewhere new where it can see what you want it to and then utilize that. So total fixed expenses, it adds them all up, tells me what they are. Your remaining net income is the $3,400 before any of those expenses come out. So then it says your net income minus your fixed gives you, and then it tells you how much you have left. So it says that's how much you have left over each month. So then I said, okay, given my net monthly income, how much more do I need to make a month to be able to save $10,000 in 6 months? So this was kind of interesting to me because $1,667 is how much you would need to save to get to $10,000 in about 6 months' time. Now, that being said, per month, your current net income is $3,400. I'd need an additional $267 to reach my savings goal. So that was pretty interesting to see. I really like seeing that it was able to say, okay, here's how much you have, here's how much you need to save. Based on how much you're saving, you would need to do $267 plus the $1,134.62 to get to about that $1,667. Now, the problem with that is too low, as you can tell. So what's really interesting is seeing that it gave you this number. However, this number plus this, if this is what we're going on, is not enough. Unless I do some math real quick, and it is counting some sort of a savings amount in here, which it doesn't appear to, because in the past it has, remember? It's done that. So again, you need to just test it, make sure everything makes sense, make sure it's telling you something that makes sense, and if it doesn't, why? Why does it not? So I said, how much should I budget for a savings goal of $10,000 in a year if I only work the $60,000 gross job and cut out unnecessary expenses like leisure or food beyond groceries? Create a lean budget for me for each month of the year, factoring in things like Christmas and holiday spending. Now, what it didn't do was give me January budget, February budget. However, it does factor it in each month, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So it says monthly savings goal. To save $10,000 a year, you need to save about $833 per month. Now that checks out. Let's aim for this amount. Fixed expenses, it brings them through. Variable expenses, groceries, it kept at $300. Remaining income net, you have about $3,400, as we know. Your monthly savings goal of $833, $3,400 minus $833 gives you your $2,567. So it says holiday and special occasions. Factor in extra expenses for holidays and special occasions, Christmas, birthdays, vacations. Set aside and add a $100 a month for these events. So it doesn't go month by month to try to say, well, this month you have Christmas and this month you have New Year's. And no, it just says $100 a month all throughout the year. That should take care of it all. I think that's pretty fair. So then it says your fixed are these, groceries is this, savings is this, holiday fund is that. Remaining discretionary is $68.62. So basically just a phone bill. So it says, remember to adjust them for your specific circumstances and priorities. Regularly review your budget. Stay on track. And it gives even more things for that. Save $10,000 a year. There are articles on this, it looks like, that it's taken from. So this was all a very fascinating thing to see. I know that there's a lot that goes into this, and you're probably thinking, well, this is more or less than I was hoping for. The good thing is you can dial it up or down depending on what you're after. But I do hope that this has been helpful for you to figure out different ways that you can use AI to help you with budgeting, to help you with all kinds of things in your life. This is a good starting point. You can obviously Google some stuff, but it is nice, as you can see, sometimes to just put into AI, well, what about this or what about that, instead of Googling it, because it's using prior information and a little bit more context that you might not be able to find by Googling, so it can actually help tailor whatever it is you're trying to say to your specific circumstance or whatever it is you're trying to talk about or you're trying to figure out. It's going to personalize that. Now again, you do have to check its math. You have to make sure everything makes sense when it gets into stuff like that, or if it's saying something insofar as, well, this is true or that is true, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it will get erroneous information, or it will say something that is not true. Now, that doesn't mean it's trying to be malicious, but it might have pulled that from somewhere that is actually incorrect, or you got to think there's all kinds of things on the internet, the Onion, there's satire, so it might take something that isn't real, taking it as real, and feeding it back to you, or take it from a forum. Who knows where it's crawling and getting information from. So just be aware and be cognizant and conscientious of what you're looking at. It helps to have a little bit of a baseline knowledge in whatever it is you're asking about. If you don't have that, I'd recommend Googling it first, then doing something like this. But as someone who's never budgeted, if you did this, you'd be pretty far along to have a nice little budget set out for yourself, to figure out how you can go about budgeting, how you can set yourself up to make sure that you actually have a budget, and what are some things you should include in your budget. What are some things to think about in a budget? These are all great things to do. You can ask as many of these things as you want, but remember, you only get about 5 in each of these. As you see, we have hit our 5 out of 5 limit here at the bottom, and it won't let us do any more if we tried to. So I hope this has been helpful. Happy budgeting, and I'll see you in the next video.